Welcome to Riches Revealed, revealing how to improve your finances and lead a richer life. Coming to you from the scruffy little city of Knoxville, Tennessee, is financial planner Jack Martin.
I want to talk to you today a little bit about a question that I get asked fairly often, which is whether or not I recommend gold to be in people's portfolios. Now, for some of you who know something about my background, most of my background was as a portfolio manager within the financial planning industry, and was brought up with some traditional methods for how to go about creating a portfolio. And usually a asset class that included some alternative investments was considered to be part of that for at least some clients. So I thought I'd talk to you a little bit about my feelings about gold and what I recommend on that. Back in 2019, I was working at a financial planning firm here in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I would frequently talk to the other advisors about what I recommended for their portfolios. Part of my job was to make recommendations about what the company's model portfolios should look like. As part of my research, I went back and looked at some of my model portfolios that I had done way back in 2007. And so, as you may remember, that was, before we got hit with the 2008 downturn. It was really useful to look back at. I was able to use some software and figure out what the returns were of those portfolios based on the models I had created at that time. And the portfolios that included gold did better during that time period of the recession. It did significantly better during the downturn of 2008 to 2009 and was still outperforming 5 years later, when that was kind of the cutoff point that I just happened to be looking at. But it showed to me what conventional wisdom has also said, which is that you've got to be looking for asset classes that have a low correlation to one another to really benefit the building of your portfolio. If you're just building a portfolio that simply includes assets that move in tandem, what we would call a high correlation with one another, then really you're not getting any benefits of diversification at all. You're just seeking what we call alpha, which is, the highest possible return, but you're not doing anything to improve your risk to reward ratio. And in this case, really the significant part is, what does your risk profile look like? So you're looking for, when you want to build a model portfolio, either you want to have a professional do it, or if you're doing it yourself, you want to be looking for assets that have a low correlation to one another, that don't move in lockstep with one another. Now, I will tell you one caveat to that is that during downturns, frequently the correlations that had been low correlations become very high correlations. Everything kind of wants to go down at the same time. So when I've done when I looked at things in the past, I did see a lot of that. But gold stood up pretty well to that. So the correlation that when I did my research here for this episode was, I saw a correlation of, for the commodity sectors in general, which, gold is one of those, correlation between commodities to equities was a 0.52. So to give you an idea, the correlation numbers run from -1 to +1. So 0.52 means there is some correlation. It's 0 would be no correlation, and -1 would be inverse correlation. They move in opposite directions. 0 means no correlation. +1 would mean they move perfectly in lockstep, 100% correlation to one another. So correlation for the commodity sector is 0.52. So it's a decent diversifier, better than what you'll see on a lot of things. There's a couple interesting aspects of gold as well. One of them is that gold is denominated in dollars. If the dollar becomes weaker, to buy every ounce of gold, you're going to need more dollars, and therefore the face value of gold is going to go up. So you're going to see increased returns during a weakening dollar period, generally speaking. So it does also kind of work as an inflation hedge. It also works kind of as what we call a black swan event hedge, where things really go south. Think there's some sort of significant terrorist attack, God forbid, something like that, and people really want to get out of their equity investments, and they're looking for the safest possible place to go. So you will see oftentimes a rush into things like the gold sector during that time period. Usually you'll see inflation is also another thing that will drive people to move towards gold as well. So generally we'll do pretty well during times of inflation. Speaking of which, I looked at the returns since that time period that I was talking to advisors and telling them what I thought their model portfolio should look like. So 5-year return on, which would be 2019 on gold, was 69%. S&P, or at least the SPDR ETF during that time period, was 101%. So again, we're not looking for something necessarily that's going to give us the highest alpha, the highest absolute return. What we are looking for is something that will give us an improved return, a smoother return over time. It acts as, kind of a buffer during things like I told you the time period that I looked at, 2008, 2009. That portfolio did significantly better when it had a gold position in there. Now, when I looked at it, I think the position that I had recommended was about 8% of that portfolio. Now, your percentage is going to vary depending on whether or not you have a fixed income portion, a equities portion, an alternatives portion. You want it to be enough so that it makes a difference and not so much that it's too significant a portion of your portfolio. I would say that let's say you had a 70-30 portfolio, 70% equity, 30% fixed income, you'd be looking at probably something like a 5% position maybe in gold to add on to that. I would probably take it from your equity portion of it to give you that 5% position. So that's kind of my position on gold. I've heard people try and say that things like Bitcoin are an alternative to gold. Based on what I just told you, do you think that there's even a similarity? If you do, I'm going to just disabuse you of that concept. There is no similarity between a position in gold and Bitcoin. They have no relations in the risk profiles at all. Bitcoin doesn't have any history to it to speak of. It's based on just what somebody else will pay for it. There's no underlying asset. I'm not sure how good a diversifier is, but I don't think it's a very good one as well. So there's no similarity in my mind between something like a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin and gold. The one that I have recommended in the past was generally the gold ETF. The ticker symbol is GLDM. I believe that is the State Street's ETF. It's generally, right now it's running at $47 a share. There is the one that was similar and bigger, SPY, by the same company, but that one is generally just a bigger kind of share portion. And also I believe that the expense ratio, as I recall, is also lower on GLDM. The expense ratio on that one it's got a 0.10 expense ratio, and I believe that the GLD is significantly higher expense ratio. So I don't see any particular reason from my perspective to be paying for SPY when you can get the GLDM, which performs almost identically for an expense ratio that's much less. So I wanted to tell you about something that's been happening recently, which is something that I find pretty exciting, and I've talked to you guys about in the past, which is the Olympics. In this case, it's been the Olympic trials that have been going on out in Oregon, I believe it is, at that new venue that they've got out there. I'm always so excited about watching the track events. When I was a kid, I didn't seem to be that interested in track events necessarily, but I've gotten more into it the last few years. And there are some real interesting characters that I really like following. And that's one of the things that I tend to like about individual sports is that It's not like team sports, like watching pro sports. I grew up being a Miami Dolphins fan. It's not quite like watching pro sports where basically you're just doing it you're rooting for it for tradition. You could almost think of it as just you're rooting for the laundry. I mean, the uniform. Whereas individual sports, you get to know something about that personal character and what they've been through. And it really makes it kind of more interesting and more exciting for me. So the people that I've been following I've mentioned her to you in a prior episode, Ellie Purrier St. Pierre. She got married, and so she's got a longer name now. But Ellie Purrier is one of the world's best intermediate distance runners. And she comes from where I grew up in New England. She grew up in a small farm, a dairy farm up in Vermont. There's something inspiring to me, at least, about somebody who comes from that small a place and manages to rise up to become one of the world's greatest athletes. She ran the 5,000 meter and came in first there, and also in the 1,500, where she only came in third place, which is generally her best event. But I don't think that she was going all out. She just wanted to make sure she qualified in the 1,500. She did say afterwards that she's only going to run the 1,500 in the Olympics and not the 5,000 meter, so she can be more rested, unlike at this event here in the trials, where by the time she got around to running the 1,500, she's kind of already worn out from multiple events to qualify for the 5,000. The other two people that I'm really interested in watching are Sydney McLaughlin-Levrone. She is amazing. Her signature event is the 400-meter hurdles. She set a new personal best, which just happens to also be a world record at the trials. She just keeps breaking her own records. Let me put it to you this way. She was so far ahead of the other participants on the final event to qualify. Has she been running against other athletes in just the plain 400, the flat 400? She still would have come in sixth. She was so fast that had the other athletes just been running without hurdles, she still would have been competitive. As it was with hurdles, she set a new world's record. So, this is pretty exciting, and she's going to be going up somebody that I love watching, a girl by the name of Femke Bol, Femke, I think it is, Bole, from the Netherlands. Femke's just had apparently a race just a few days ago, and her time is hot on the heels in that 400-meter hurdles with Sydney McLaughlin-Levrone. Really close. Femke's got a great story, too, for her, because sometime fairly recently, she ran a race in the World Championships. She came out of it with 2 medals, and I'm going to tell you why she didn't get a third one in there. The poor girl was the anchor of her relay team. She was in a hotly being contested by somebody from the United States, a runner. She was still ahead, but tripped right at the finish line. And I felt so bad for her. She went down hard and really hit her head. Like, I felt so bad for her because I didn't even see in the highlights anybody come and try and check to see if she was okay. And the announcer was so classless. The announcer at one point starts laughing about it. It was not funny at all, in my opinion. The poor girl, got hurt. She got up from it, but it was not a funny moment at all, in my opinion. And now I've already kind of let the cat out of the bag about what happens in the third race. So the third race was another relay, and Femke Bol she was anchoring again. I think this was the men's and women's. So they had Femke Bol anchoring on this one. Femke Bol started so far behind that the announcer had said, well, they needed a lead, but it looks like it's going to be too much for Femke Bol to be able to overcome that much of a lead, for the United States. This was right after she had just tripped and hit her head in a prior race, in the race before this. Femke Bol ran her down. It was so exciting. It was great. So, I'm really looking forward to the Olympics. You guys who know me at all know I get all excited about the Olympics and the Olympic spirit and everything about it. I love international competition and the fact that it brings people together and what they understand about athletes, what they understand about one another is what it took to get there. They may not know anything about one another. They may not speak the same language. Their countries may be antagonistic to one another, but stepping onto the pitch, the court, the track, whatever it is, they understand just the kind of sacrifices that the other person has made. So there's that human connection to people during the Olympics. So I really love the concept and the whole spirit behind the Olympics.
The end.